Ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral, que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces, nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Hoy, esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos, no podemos ser neutrales.
More than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to our member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo del público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral, que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces, nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Hoy, esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to all member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the CTOUR, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Bueno, la CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo de lo público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral, que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces, nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Hoy, esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos, no podemos ser neutrales.
than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
Señor Presidente, con 31 delegaciones.
Mr. Chairman, we have 31 delegations here. We have the necessary quorum to continue. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much indeed. And a good morning to all of you, distinguished permanent and alternate representatives of the members of the Organization of American States, distinguished Assistant Secretary General of this organization, Nestor Mendez, distinguished representatives of the permanent observers, representatives of civil society, and special guests. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to hereby open this special session of the Permanent Council per Resolution 1269 of this Council, the purpose of which is to receive the candidates who are running for the position of Secretary General. This will, of course, occur next 1st of March in this very room in order to choose the next head of our representation for the period 2025-2030. And with that in mind, it is a great honor to receive the candidates to the position of Secretary General, distinguished Ambassador Albert Ramdin, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Business and International Cooperation of the Republic of Suriname, and His Excellency Ruben Ramirez Lescano, the representative, indeed, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Paraguay. Per Article 43 of the regulations of the Permanent Council, I now put to you the draft order of business that you have before you. It's CP/OD 2523/25, which has been drawn up strictly adherent to the applicable rules and the directives that must be followed with regard to receiving the candidates to the position of Permanent Central. And these were approved by unanimous consent last February 5th at the Council meeting. If there are no observations, this document is hereby approved. Dear colleagues, before we begin, let me welcome Arnoldo Albertinoco, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Costa Rica. We are very honored by your presence and welcome. Dear colleagues, Resolution 1269, which was approved by the Permanent Council at that special session that was held on the 4th of December 2024, does set forth in operative paragraph 6 the need to convene on the 10th of February of 2025 at headquarters of this organization a meeting of the Permanent Council, to which meeting the member states will be present, representatives thereof, in order to receive a public presentation of all those countries' responses to the question of their plans or their position should they be elected. In that same document, countries are exhorted to put forward the candidates for the position of Permanent Council so that on the 3rd of February of 2025, by that time, we would receive the candidates to the position of Secretary General of this organization. Operative paragraph 4 that follows in that same resolution, ladies and gentlemen, for your information, states further that that particular date will in no way impede or block the rule or the freedom of the countries per the general rules of this organization to put forward their candidate anytime before that date, and indeed anytime up to the date of the election itself. The government of the Republic of Suriname, through the note that was put to this organization, which was distributed as AGCP INF 795-24, dated February 8, 2024, formally presented the candidacy of Mr. Albert Ramdin, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Business and International Cooperation of the Republic of Suriname. The Republic of Paraguay, for its part, through the mission that its permanent representation put forward in AGC INF 822/24, dated August 30th of last year, 2024, put forward the candidacy of Ruben Ramirez Lescano, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Paraguay. Now, both of these candidates are among us today in order to share their vision, their view of what this organization should do and be, as it is the premier political forum of the hemisphere. The Organization of American States, as you know, is the oldest organization of integration in the world. It was founded in 1920 and 1948 in its constitutional letter. It has had time and time again an important role in resolving the conflicts that have arisen over that time and is indeed a premier forum of diplomatic integration. The General Secretariat is the place in order to keep the work of this organization active and vibrant. We see it as an organization that works for the members, with the members. To that end, it is efficient and remains, in all of our views, the premier means by which each one can feel useful and integrated and very much a cogent part of the march forward of this hemisphere. We will have an opportunity then to listen to the future of the organization in the eyes of these candidates so that we can be better positioned to face the challenges of our time, not only in this hemisphere, but indeed worldwide. This is your chance to speak to dialogue, cooperation, and forward progress in the regional assembly in the world that is most united and most prosperous. We hope that the rules that we have established for this session will serve you well. We will be very careful to keep to time. Every candidate will have a maximum of 20 minutes for the initial presentation. Following that, member states will have 2 minutes each to put questions to the candidates, and after a group of 5 statements, the floor will go to each of the candidates so that they too will have another 5 minutes to respond. 5 minutes, 5 minutes. After this time, each candidate will have another 5 minutes to present final comments. Please be aware and take note of the fact that at this very important special session of the Council, no final decisions will be made. No final decisions will be made. I am counting on you, ladies and gentlemen, to adhere to these rules so that we can proceed as effectively as possible. So, Excellencies and dear colleagues, per our second point, or item, I should say, on our order of business, we shall now move to hear the initial presentations of the candidates for the post of Secretary General of the Organization of American States per the vote that was taken on the 5th of February. At random, it has been decided that Mr. Albert Ramdin, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation Affairs of the Republic of Suriname, will speak first. And we will immediately thereafter hear Mr. Ruben Ramirez Lescano, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Paraguay, for his own statement. Beyond the official candidate that is being presented, we have in document CP M345/24, distributed on the 11th of October last year, and CP M5 of the 10th of February of this year, you have additional information, I say, regarding the biography and various additional points of information regarding Ambassador Albert Ramdin, Foreign Affairs Minister. In document CP M10-252-25, distributed on the 27th of January of this year, the candidacy of Ambassador Ruben Ramirez Lescano was reiterated, and additional information was provided for the benefit of the member states. Ladies and gentlemen, and dear colleagues, Ambassador Albert Ramdin is a stellar diplomat in Suriname. From July of 2020, he has served as Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Affairs, and International Cooperation of Suriname, beyond being President of the Council of Ministers and second chair for national security in his country. We know that Ambassador Ramdin carried out a very important role in this very place. He was Assistant Secretary General in 2005 and re-elected to that same position in 2010. Aside from which, he has had various different positions representing Suriname throughout the Western Hemisphere, head of the states of the Caribbean and head of cooperation in that area, and particular emphasis for development in Latin America and the Caribbean. He has also been the head of diplomatic affairs in the Caribbean, ambassador for the OAS, and non-resident ambassador in Costa Rica. He has been the political advisor for political affairs and principal advisor for Ministry for Industry and Commerce. Head also of the Hindi and Islamic Financial Group in the Netherlands and has also been ambassador there. He has a degree in social development and also a master's from the University of Amsterdam. He's a specialist in Latin American affairs, and in order to honor his work here, he received the Great Cross of Rio Branco in Brazil in 2022. He's a specialist in extractive industries and has headed the group on mining and other extraction industries, as well as other key areas. Now, Ruben Ramirez Lescano is indeed also a stellar figure in the Paraguayan political forum. He has been, for some years now, head of Foreign Affairs. He's a graduate of the Buenos Aires University, also Sorbonne University in Paris, and has degrees from the University of California. He launched his diplomatic career in 1989 and was promoted to ambassador in 2004. He has held several important positions in diplomacy of his country, a member of the cabinet of President Duarte between 2006 and 2008, played a key role as Vice Minister of Economic and Integration Affairs, also led the group on leading the liaison between the common market and Paraguay, and also was important with regard to the UN, other specialized organized, and indeed the World Trade Organization based in Geneva. He has represented his country in several places, Consul General in Los Angeles and a minister in his country's embassy in Paris. He's been very key in energy and social through the Andean group CAF, and was a representative of that group in Argentina and Panama, with particular responsibility on Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. Distinguished candidates, on behalf of this important group here, the states members of the Organization of American States welcome you and look forward to hearing you as you speak to what it would mean for each of you to head up the secretariat of this important organization. Let me first give the floor to Ambassador Albert Ramdin, and we look forward to hearing you, Ambassador, for a maximum of 20 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning. Buenos días a todos. Chairman of the Permanent Council, Ambassador Hector Arce, Assistant Secretary General, Ambassador Nestor Mendes, special recognition for the presence of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Costa Rica, our good friend Andre Arnoldo Tinoco, my colleague from Paraguay, Minister Ruben Lescano Ramirez, distinguished permanent representatives, distinguished permanent observers, delegates, a special greeting to the staff of the OAS General Secretariat, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a distinct pleasure and privilege to be in this building again. This time as the candidate for the position of Secretary General, with the intention to working with you to advance and revitalize the Organization of American States, its goals and purpose for greater impact and facing the future with optimism and resolve. Ladies and gentlemen, during my term as Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Business and International Cooperation of the Republic of Suriname, and before that as Assistant Secretary General of the OAS, and even further back when I served as Assistant Secretary General for Community Relations of the Caribbean Community, I worked with each of your countries at different times. I have visited all countries in our hemisphere, carefully listening and taking notes of the views of member states and sharing perspectives on substantive issues of peace, security, and development. Señores embajadores, señoras embajadoras.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have lived closely with the broad diversity of the peoples and traditions of these Americas. We come from different races, different economic and legal systems, and this indeed is the root of our richness. We have, aside from that, in our culture, in our gastronomy, in so many different aspects, enormous diversity. And again, I believe that is what is at the heart of what we have to offer by way of a brilliant future to our people, north to south. And that is indeed, I hope you agree, the heart of what this organization should aspire to in its policies and in its actions. This commitment, which is to the well-being and welfare of our populations, is something that came to me very, very strongly when I was working with one of the important mining industries of this region, focusing, of course, on security and safety in our communities and responsible and sustainable development. It had been a very long time since I had had the honor to work there in times of crisis, in times of celebrations, both in the private sphere and publicly. And in both, have we not? We have known how to face our challenges within our borders and indeed beyond them with our neighbors and new allies. We've worked hand in hand. And this in a sphere of mutual trust. We are, I do believe, very, very clear-sighted as to the challenges in front of us. This hemisphere is facing enormous, enormous challenges indeed. And our aspirations have to be as great as these are. Our history tells us that when the going gets tough, we need to show our mettle and come up with new and useful solutions.
Who lived in a small South American and equally Caribbean country. This little boy studied hard, but didn't just learn lessons from textbooks. He studied the world around him. He learned from the generations before him. His parents instilled within him values, important values and skills to navigate the numerous challenges he faced. When he thought about the future, early on, he was determined to face it with optimism. This boy dreamed of a world where hard work and strength of character, matched with education and access to resources and opportunity, would lead to the quality of life future generations would be proud of. He dreamed of a world where citizens would not be forced to seek opportunity in foreign lands, but would enjoy peace, security, and stability, and access to explore and develop the resources of their own land. Today, the dream is still alive, and that young Surinamese boy stands before you with less hair, mostly gray, but more hope and dedication and commitment than ever before. Distinguished permanent representatives, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of work to be done. It will not be an easy task, and the road ahead is a long one. But I'm determined to walk with you through these demanding times and look to the future with hope. I see the challenges facing the hemisphere and confronting the OAS, and I'm painfully aware of the issues of our region. But as a lifelong optimist, I commit to finding opportunities to take this organization forward, making it more effective, streamlined, responsive, and relevant again. Allow me to tell you about my journey in getting here today. From 2005, as mentioned before, 2015, I worked alongside Secretary General Jose Miguel Insulza, serving as the Assistant Secretary General of this organization. In those greatly inspiring 10 years, my vision for the hemisphere was captured in the theme, people, peace, and prosperity. Secure, peaceful, and healthy democracies enabled by sound economies in which all citizens have a part in. It is my privilege to have worked in the Organization of American States in different roles and capacities. In the years leading up to my position as Assistant Secretary General, I also served as the permanent representative of the Republic of Suriname to the OAS, as senior advisor in the cabinet of former President of Colombia, Secretary General Cesar Gaviria, as chair of the Permanent Council, and as chair of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development. In all these qualities, I have learned and contributed to the inner workings of the OAS, including critical issues like budget, General Assemblies, Haiti, Summits of the Americas, engagement with the private sector, and many more. I have also served as Assistant Secretary General for Foreign and Community Relations of the CARICOM Secretariat, which gave me relevant insights in the problems of small and vulnerable nations in our region, such as in the Caribbean and Central America. All regional groupings have a set of common challenges, goals and objectives, and it is important that the OAS responds equally to those needs. The OAS must be relevant to all member states. Serving on both the political and the administrative sides of the OAS and in the leadership, I had the opportunity, the unique opportunity, to understand and appreciate the inner workings of this institution. I also saw the unmistakable impact of the OAS on critical hemispheric issues. We can make a difference as an organization. Distinguished representatives, over the course of more than 30 years in various capacities, I have collaborated with dedicated colleagues, and I have met many talented and committed persons working at the OAS. Today, I want to thank the staff of this important hemispheric body for their commitment and dedication to the goals and purpose of the OAS. You are, without any doubt, the backbone of this organization, the value of which we not only recognize, but we will miss deeply and sincerely when there is no OAS in the hemisphere. Permit me now to share with you my vision and views and concrete actions and plans regarding the organization and the Western Hemisphere at large. Mindful of the fact that with the remaining 10 minutes which I have, I will not be able to give you a full overview, but I hope you'll get a glimpse of it. In my view, the OAS must be repositioned at this point in history to face the changing landscape. I believe in the power of multilateralism. We can and must work together to create a better world as we depend on each other in so many ways. I believe in regionalism as geographic proximity matters. Advancing peace and prosperity starts in your own neighborhood. I believe in strong intergovernmental institutions to foster cooperation and consensus, as well as member states-driven mandates to advance democracy, peace, security, and prosperity. I believe in strong and independent judicial systems, rule of law, inclusive and effective governance towards sustainable development. I also believe in the role and the relevance of the OAS in continuing a zone of peace in the Western Hemisphere. For this, the political will and commitment of all are needed. Engagement, in my view, is a critical element of multilateralism and intergovernmental relations, and as such, a tool to progress and success. We are fortunate not to have comparable conflicts as in other parts of the world in our own hemisphere. But I believe it is our collective duty as part of the leadership of our respective countries and as members of the oldest regional grouping of nations in the world, starting in 1819, under various names leading up to the OAS in 1948, to ensure that there are no violations against humanity. As mandated, the organization will support member states in securing a peaceful future for all citizens and the generations to come. Over the last few decades, the world has become more accessible through technological and transportation evolutions. This deep interconnectedness of global system and the interdependence between countries require us to work together. Collaboration and dialogue are required to overcome the many traditional challenges we all face. Multilateralism in this regard remains a critical tool to achieve an order of peace and justice, to promote our solidarity, to strengthen collaboration, and to defend our sovereignty, territorial integrity, and our independence. The contribution of the OAS as a platform for dialogue and consensus building and cooperation must regain its right space in the interstate relations in the Western Hemisphere. Estimados miembros del Consejo Permanente,
Esteemed members of the Permanent Council, it's our duty to prevent conflicts and to ensure peaceful solution of conflict, to seek out together solutions to the political, legal, social, and economic challenges we face, and to strengthen peace and security in all regions. These objectives, enshrined in Article 2 of the 1948 Charter, continue to be germane today. It's clear that Our mandate is to strengthen peace and security of the continent. In the spirit of these objectives, the OAS should be ever more relevant for member states.
I'm committed to investing in and actively engaging in collaborative efforts, promoting dialogue and action on this issue with all member states. Our principal modus operandi needs to be based on open, transparent, and constructive dialogue with an open mind and respect for different perspectives and respect for all. It is of critical importance to be an effective multilateral organization with the purpose of generating solutions based on respect, political will, and commitment. I believe to achieve this, we must strike a balance between short-term problem solving and crisis management and long-term peaceful and sustainable development of our countries. Our efforts must continue to focus on institutional capacity building, proactive approaches, and quiet diplomacy to mitigate and better prevent conflict and tensions in our hemisphere. Colleagues, no country, regardless of its power, of their strength, can fully and comprehensively address all its challenges by itself. Cross-border organized crime, illegal flows of capital, trafficking in persons, and smuggling all cause grave danger in this hemisphere. These issues undermine regional and global peace. For us, I believe it has become crucial to strengthen cooperation, share intelligence, and implement coordinated efforts across borders. One of the complex issues facing us today is migration. And of course, we can't discuss in depth the migration issue here, but we need to address this issue head on. It will require short-term actions and inclusive dialogue about the flow of people in the long term. We need to address the fundamental issues, the underlying circumstances which cause migration, including the lack of employment and opportunity and inadequate development within our borders. All peoples, all families want steady income and a chance of a better life. We must do more to meet the needs of our people within our own borders. The second root cause of the current migration challenge is tied to security. Ladies and gentlemen, both of these issues can be addressed if countries are willing to dialogue, collaborate, and mobilize in a more effective manner. I firmly believe migration will become a more manageable issue when we give committed focus and action to the underlying causes. Ladies and gentlemen, many of OAS member states have listed integral and sustainable development as a priority, understandably. Therefore, there is an absolute need for stronger dialogue on the allocation of resources on the development agenda at the political level. Our member states confront a range of challenges ranging from natural and man-made disasters, access to clean water, resource development and management, as well as renewable and non-renewable energy supplies on a daily basis. We must continuously review where we stand and what resources are available. For integral development to be achieved, we must maintain our focus on education, training, and collaboration in these efforts. I will now, in the last 4 minutes, share with you, and we will distribute this document, the 3 areas where I believe clear action is required. 1, strengthening the operations of the organization to make us relevant again, useful, and regain the stature which this organization used to have. These are some of the suggestions, and we will work on this together with you. First of all, strengthen the institutional capacity and work with the Secretary to improve efficiency in operations and effectiveness in the execution of approved mandates by member states. Stronger alignment, more dedicated and targeted execution. As part of this exercise, establish a closer and seamless collaboration between the institutional and the political secretariat. Thirdly, execute within the financial means and realities of the OAS the reform track as advised by the AM consultants for a more efficient use of resources and aligning program execution with member states-driven mandates. Seek the authority of member states to allow the Secretary General in the new term to develop and propose a leaner organization and mandate-targeted and representative organizational layout. Develop a realistic resource mobilization plan, not only in terms of finances, but also in terms of institutional collaboration to overcome the shortfall in the regular and the specific fund budgets. Develop a functioning and effective dialogue structure at the level of the executive management and within the secretariats to embed member states' adopted mandates in work programs and projects. And lastly, to intensify communication with member states, as well as the lines and structures for continuous dialogue and information sharing within the organization. The OAS does a lot of good things at a technical level. We must share our story with the community. That story is not known effectively. Second area is about the proactive actions and collaboration with all members. This will enable us to be more effective and efficient in the area of strengthening our relations with the inter-American system, as well with international partners. I want to say also that in this context, we do have some crises in the hemisphere. One of them is Haiti, and we need to make sure that we regain our role and responsibility with regard to the Republic of Haiti and support the Haitian people in their efforts to gain the same life we all want for ourselves. Last one has the area of long-term sustainable development through innovative technology, education, partnerships with the private sector, and education. Mr. Chairman, in closing, I hope that very briefly I have been able to give you a glimpse of who I am, what I believe in, and what my vision is for this organization. Strategic visioning must be accompanied by renewed commitment to the original goals and purposes of this necessary hemispheric institution: peace, stability, security, sustainable development, and equality. I know as no other that it requires tough leadership and diplomatic skills to foster dialogue and resolve disputes between the various social and political stakeholders with different interests in an environment with many dichotomies. We contend daily with competing interests, but as a senior government official, I can tell you that it is possible to facilitate growth in a constructive, peaceful, and stable environment. But this is something we cannot do alone. We must do this together. I need input from all of you to make the OAS live up to what we all endorsed it to be: a respected institution that is an honest broker in times of conflict, a facilitator of development and growth, and ultimately a contributor to the well-being and peace for all citizens. Let me take guidance in what the great Mahatma Gandhi said once: the future depends on what we do in the present. Muchas gracias, and thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias.
I thank Ambassador Ramdeen for your presentation. We will now invite Ambassador Rubén Ramirez Lescano to take the floor, to come up to the podium and take the floor, and we give you the same 20 minutes that the Ambassador Ramdeen just had. Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chairman of the Permanent Council, Ambassador Hector Arce, representative of the plurinational state of Bolivia, Mr. Minister of Foreign Affairs of Suriname, Albert Ramdeen, ladies and gentlemen representatives, Representative of Costa Rica, Mr. Tonico, Secretary General, Assistant to Secretary General, Nestor Mendez, permanent representatives and delegates, representatives of observer countries, distinguished staff of the Organization of American States, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor for me to address you and to present my proposals and vision as a candidate to the position of the General Secretary, as General Secretary of this body.
The President Santiago Peña committed with the multilateral system and under the commitment also with the values and principles of freedom, democracy, human rights, and rule of law, he decided to present my candidacy. And precisely The OAS is one of the oldest initiatives of multilateralism. En este ámbito,
now, within this context, states desire a harmonious relationship based on shared values and a search for solutions to common problems that we all face in our societies. Since the inception of this organization, it has worked on strengthening peace and security of the hemisphere, the promotion and consolidation of democracy, peaceful solution of conflicts and differences, the eradication of poverty, human rights, security, economic, social, cultural development, and strengthening the multilateral system. Over time, and with the rise of certain phenomena such as transnational organized crime, health crises, the advent of social networks and disruptive technological changes, including artificial intelligence, automation, and the digitalization make it necessary for us to broaden the institutional focus as we take on these different phenomena in our dialogue and analysis. The Americas have within them regions and groups of countries that share commonalities, but each one has created its own history. We are fully aware that member states face different realities and that we also believe that strategic and tactical decisions are required that are appropriate for each one of them. That's why we propose a more human organization that's closer to people, that responds to this new hemispheric reality with a return to the founding principles of the Organization of American States. This renewed organization will implement effective mechanisms that are tailor-made to the different realities and capabilities of each member state to thereby respond to unique situations in each country. The main tools to achieve these answers will be dialogue and negotiation among member states and the General Secretariat, not only in the daily administration of affairs, but also in projects, programs, and initiatives such that mandates be the result of a consensus. The actions of the General Secretariat cannot be one-sided. They, and I reiterate, they need to stem from dialogue and a consensus to recover the necessary credibility, legitimacy, and relevance that this organization has had throughout its history, overcoming thereby declarations that and intervening successfully in the different challenges in our hemisphere. Now, over this time frame, we've held in meetings in which we have heard contributions from heads of state, representatives, and actors of the countries of South America, Central America, the Caribbean, and North America. Dear and distinguished representatives, you all have taken part in meetings with me, bilateral and multilateral meetings, in which you have enriched me with your proposals and observations and desires. And these meetings have enabled us to delve deeply into the different concerns and outlooks such that we end up enriching what is proposed by the General Secretariat. Now, to carry out what we have just expressed as being the four pillars of our organization, which are interconnected, it will be necessary to implement the following thematic actions. Under democracy, the biggest challenge to democracy as a model of government is to bring to bear effective responses to the needs of our societies, with ensuring there be a positive impact on the quality of life of each one of our citizens. Different reports and diagnostics show that throughout the hemisphere, people are disenchanted with the quality of democracy, and I believe that it's necessary from the OAS for us to carry out actions that would strengthen democracy and enable us to retake the active stance of the organization to strengthen, promote, and defend democracy is an unavoidable institutional mandate of the OAS. Throughout the region, on a recurring basis, political strife or conflicts arise, which are characterized by division and polarization of societies, jeopardizing the stability of democracy. Now, these divisions and this polarization within countries is now spreading to the multilateral realm, and the OAS is the organization from which we have to seriously discuss these differences for us to find a path to move forward together. That's why we're going to pay attention to strengthening the institutions of democracy, respecting each country's sovereignty. We will create crisis teams and early response teams to promote dialogue and garner consensus in order to avoid a deepening of these problems and to seek out solutions. We will bolster the electoral observation missions, which will carry out their work in keeping with the terms set forth by member states as they have been doing successfully thus far. We will work tirelessly strengthening education for democracy, especially with an emphasis on young people, youth. Young people should be our priority because they are our present and our future. We're going to offer training on aspects such as political parties, popular participation in elections, and transparency in government administration. As regards human rights, the promotion and respect of human rights are an essential part of life in a democracy. If we want more democracy, we have to strengthen the human rights system. The OAS should be a lead player on this subject matter. We will ensure the full operation and independence of the Inter-American Court and the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. We think that it's essential for us to focus assistance in keeping with the reality hemisphere-wide in each region, because each country in each region have unique needs and aptitudes. Now, one of the key aspects and subjects of discussion and that call for attention in our countries is multidimensional security. The region is going through challenging times regarding different aspects of security. Organized crime spreads beyond each country's borders and has become a transnational phenomenon that calls for new ways of fighting it. The OAS is the only regional organization with a mandate to work on bolstering security in the Americas. Now, backed by this underlying principle, we will work toward ensuring that this organization be a tool that will contribute to building a safer, stronger, and more prosperous hemisphere. We have seen that transnational bodies, that is, transnational crime organizations, have become more integrated than states themselves, and that cannot stand. We therefore will foster greater cooperation among member states, consolidating the Hemispheric Security Committee as a body that addresses this subject matter in a multilateral way. We will articulate more and more meetings with the different operators of justice and national security bodies to support competent bodies of this organization that will enable us to tackle head-on corruption and transnational crime at all levels. We're not just talking about trafficking in weapons of drugs and persons, money laundering, corruption. we are also talking about the need for us to have a multidimensional approach to security. And we cannot continue working in an isolated way to fight models of crime that go beyond our borders. We need to have a system of reliable data and exchange of information at the disposal of each one of the member states and coordinate efforts on security across all agencies and international organizations. Now, computer crime also rises in the region with negative impacts on countries' economies and on the lives of our citizens. Artificial intelligence and cybersecurity are growing and their development is advancing. The OAS, or rather, these phenomena undermine our democracy, and these are aspects that need to be addressed, making use of new technological tools with which we can tackle these challenges. OAS, as a hemispheric organization, should foster the interaction between member states on these topics, and that's why we propose to create immediately a permanent collaboration for us to tackle these new challenges. Distinguished representatives, over the last years, the region of the Americas has seen growing flows of migrants across borders as they seek out a better lot in life. This stemming from political causes or even climate causes. Now, this has given rise to humanitarian crises which test countries' ability to cope, both in transit countries and destination countries. And this means it's necessary to ensure services be made available, food, health, housing, education, legal protection, among others. Mass migration rather, affects countries, giving rise to imbalances and regional challenges that are affecting the harmonious relationship among countries of the hemisphere. And the most valuable asset of our region are the precious lives of each individual. So we need to avoid this scattershot approach. The OAS should address the different actors, governments, non-government organizations, bringing them all together for us to tackle these growing needs. One of the most important elements is sustainable integral development. To create conditions for countries of the region to develop is one of the pillars of this organization and one of the greatest challenges that the OAS faces. To this end, the Inter-American Council of Integral Development and the Executive Secretariat of Integral Development have been created, but the purpose or the target or objective rather has yet to be met. Now, this situation calls for us to be more creative, for us to craft more effective designs. Now, over the time I've been here with you, I have had the opportunity to meet with the high-level authorities of the multilateral financial organizations to talk about the focus that we together can have to bring to bear with this organization, our OAS. That's why our proposal then is for us to work in partnership with multilateral organizations such as the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Development Bank for Latin America and the Caribbean, CAF, and the Organization for Cooperation and Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, such that we can strengthen OAS and craft programs that have a positive impact on the development of countries and on their inhabitants. During my visits to a number of countries, I have identified that they oftentimes have very scant access to financing opportunities, especially when compared to the magnitude of projects and programs that they have. But these projects need to be prioritized by the governments, and therefore they need access to financing. So we have to seek out agreements with systems of the Inter-American system and the EU and other potential allies. Distinguished representatives. The OAS is comprised of member states with differing levels of development, and what works in one country doesn't necessarily work elsewhere. Each one needs its own approach, bearing in mind its degree of development and priorities within the region. Now, you have, together with national governments, we will carry out a differentiated work that seeks to meet the unique aspects and needs of each country and to establish achievable goals, however challenging they may be, to strengthen OAS country offices necessary to implement programs and to bring to bear greater action. And finally, we will work with member states on crafting effective actions to address climate change and natural disasters so that we can achieve a healthier region and planet for us, for future generations, and that is our commitment. Recent events throughout the Americas remind us that no one is immune of natural disasters, and here we also have differences. Now, if you look at the hurricanes that hit the Caribbean, Central America, North America, and El Niño and La Niña, leading to droughts in the south or fires in the north with loss of assets and loss of life. The OAS should play a leading role in the region in tackling these risks and challenges. Our commitment is to propose public policies and to keep an active agenda that seeks out a coordinated approach across different national and regional organizations to strengthen our resilience and our responses. Another aspect in this important environmental approach is that we, in building public policies and crafting, that we not become protectionist in our policies. This is a matter that we have to address in an orderly and coordinated way to avoid locking our horns and reaching impasses that we cannot get past. Now, a key aspect for us is that beyond strengthening institutional pillars, we have to have or ensure that we be properly administered. And this efficient administration means that we have to belt tighten and to do away with red tape, become more efficient. That's necessary for us to be more effective and to do so with a human face. We need to fine-tune our budget so that we can meet our institutional goals and be more effective. We want for there to be a frank dialogue with member countries for us to address this very difficult financial situation. The structure of the regular fund have to be brought into line with each other. There has to be a direct connection between mandates approved by countries and mandates, or rather resources ascribed to each one of these mandates. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the ability and we are in a position to order our house, reshuffle our house such that we can address all of the shortcomings of our operation.
I've had and continue to have the privilege to represent my country in multiple circumstances. This is the second time that I am serving as Foreign Affairs Minister of the Republic of Paraguay. I have also had the opportunity to represent OAS as Chief of Electoral Observation Mission and have held management high-level position in multilateral financial organizations as well as in the private sector. Moi, je pense que
And I believe, Your Excellency, your time is up. I am wrapping up, says the President. It would be a great honor to to head up an organization such as this. You would have in me a co-worker and someone who knows how to listen and who will ever look for consensus in development to ensure that the historic mission, the raison d'etre of the OAS, is in fact carried out. Our charter speaks of offering an environment in which mankind can develop and prosper, and that is what we would do together. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ramirez-Lezcano, for that presentation. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let us now move to the round under item 3, which is the session for member states to put questions and for the candidates to the position of Secretary General to answer. We will have an opportunity to hear each of these candidates. And once the presentations of these candidates has been made, and we have just heard them, we have disposed that we would have a round of questions. And after every 5 interventions by member states, the chair will give the floor to the candidates for their answers. I beg you, ladies and gentlemen, I beg you to respect the 2-minute interval that has been awarded each of you. I'm afraid the chair here is going to be very, very strict, and I hope you understand it is for everyone's benefit, not least that of the candidates. The candidates will answer the questions put to them from their seats here, and the round will be the same as for the initial statements. In other words, we will first hear Ambassador Ramdin and secondly hear Minister Ramirez-Lezcano. I not only ask, I beg you, without any embarrassment, I beg each of you to please, please, please honor the 5-minute time that has been imparted. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is yours. You can direct the question to me, but you can direct it directly to the speakers. Thank you. Chile. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to each of the ministers for their presence and for their statements. We have heard about this different factors that bear on the influence, on the impact of the OAS, okay? But I think there is yet another and more immediate crisis that is brewing, and that will, I believe, have a very direct impact on this organization in terms of its ability to fulfill its mandate. 3 days ago, last Friday, we received a letter about money, about the impact of the lack thereof. And in order to fully assess the impact of such a financial crisis, let us remember we still have 1,035 people working for the OAS in different positions. But the immediate impact is that by February 5th, there is, in the best cases, the need to get rid of 280, to RIF 280. 1 out of every 6 persons that work at the OAS will at the very least be suspended. Not fired, but suspended. The question is, even though the crisis, we hope, would be hypothetical, but if you were today in the position of Secretary General, how would you handle this very immediate crisis that is affecting the ability of the organization to live up to its mandates? Thank you. Thank you, Chile, and thank you for being so careful with time. The Bahamas is recognized.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to all. My question is actually directed to one of the candidates, if that is within the protocol. a warm welcome. My question is directed to Minister Ramirez. Good morning, Honorable Minister. Good to see you. I've always held those who pursue public and high office in utmost esteem. One has to give so much of themselves and make personal and professional sacrifices. Accordingly, in recognition of what may be involved in seeking the leadership of this organization, particularly at this juncture, as outlined more so by Ambassador Calderovich from Chile, and please accept the sincerest congratulations, expressions of appreciation, and expressions of condolences. The current Secretary General, Luis Almagro, can certainly attest that the job is not easy, and people like myself certainly do not make it any easier. Excellency, I'm inclined to deduce that to inspire and to lead and it takes individuals with fortitude, integrity, and applied competencies. The delegation of Paraguay, and I quote during the last November, in view of this scenario, I reiterate our commitment to the organization, but I would like to say that in view of the situation that has arisen, I repeat in review of the systemic and continuous weakening of the organization, Paraguay would be considering the probability of withdrawing the candidacy that it had presented at this time. It is a possibility that we are going to study, and that's closed translation. Honorable Minister, it is presumed, if only by your mere presence here today, that the study or studies were conducted. As such, please advise to what are your plans to address the chronic funding shortfall facing the organization, informing therein on how do you reconcile the position taken by your delegation only 100 days ago, and assure member states and staff that any shortfall of the organization, whether it be fiscal or any other challenge, will not invoke or solicit a similar judgment.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Bahamas. The delegation of Belize is recognized.
We join in congratulating both Minister Randim and Minister Ramirez for the insightful and compelling presentations. I think it's evident that we are faced with both a privilege and a challenge. The privilege of choosing between two highly capable candidates, and the challenge of making a decision that will shape the future of our organization. And we deeply appreciate your presentations, and regardless of the outcome, we extend our best wishes to both candidates, and we reaffirm our support to whomever wins or whoever is elected. However, that said, I should add that we firmly believe that the leadership demonstrated by the Caribbean through its steadfast commitment to peace, the promotion of human rights, the defense of democracy, and the response to the existential challenges that we face offers invaluable experience that is especially needed in this moment. And so it is with this conviction that Belize expresses its hope and strong anticipation that for the first and historic time, we will have an SG from the Caribbean. All that said, my question is, you've made very compelling presentations, and I want to ask both of you, what do you propose, how do you propose that we can hold the Secretary General accountable to deliver on what you're proposing? For example, would you be willing to tie a portion of your compensation to deliver intangible results for the organization? Thank you.
Muchas gracias. La delegación.
Thank you very much, Belize. The delegation of Barbados is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I too, like the previous speakers, would like to commend two eminent candidates. However, we within the Caribbean community represent a bloc of 14 nations, and we have always been the bridesmaids. We believe that at this time, given the challenges that are faced within our hemisphere and within this organization, that the Caribbean needs to be seen as in the foremost leadership position, and therefore we in the bloc of Caribbean community nations will support the candidature of Albert Ramdin. We believe that the time has come for the Caribbean to assume the leadership of the OAS, and to take us in the right direction, given the many challenges that we face on climate change and on all the other issues that face our hemisphere and our region. And so we endorse the candidature of Minister Albert Ramdin. That is my comment at this time, Mr. Chair.
Gracias.
Thank you, Barbados. And finally, to close the first round of 5 statements, the delegation of Mexico is recognized. Thank you, Chair, and a very good morning to the distinguished candidates. Mexico will ask one question following the same logic, and it goes to the role of the Secretary Generals, but it has 3 different elements. First of all, if you had the opportunity to put forward a reform to the Charter of the OAS and put that to the General Assembly, what would be the aspect on which you would concentrate, and what would it entail? That's 1. 2, from your own perspective and views, what role should the OAS play with regard to extra-regional political issues that are already being addressed in other bilateral institutions? 3, should you be elected, what measures would you take in order to improve the institutional communication between us and to make a better effort to distinguish the pronouncements, or the statements, I should say, of the Secretary General on the one hand and the statements of the member states on the other? Thank you very much, Mexico. Ambassador Ramdin, you are first, and you have 5 minutes, sir, to respond to the points that have put to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a very firm chairman. 5 minutes is very short, but let me start by the question of the distinguished ambassador of Chile. It's a very critical issue. There are several factors that determine whether an organization can be successful. One of them is certainly the finances, the resources. We are already faced in the OAS, not today, but for many decades, with a shortfall in the regular fund and in specific funds. So we have to assess properly what the impact will be of the recent cuts, the temporary suspension on the basis of the executive order, and I believe that's until the 20th of April. But in any case, we will have to assess, that's the first thing to do, is knowing the financial situation of the OAS, what impact it has on personnel, what impact it has on the functioning of the OAS, what impact it has on the programs. And I must say, the areas in which the executive order had an impact are areas where I believe relevant, good contribution is made towards the goals of the OAS. The Inter-American Human Rights Commission, SICTA and SICAT, I believe, so in security. So once we have that assessed, we will have to see how we can solve those issues temporarily as it is. But I think most important will be to engage with the country involved and to demonstrate the usefulness of these programs and to make sure that everybody, but certainly the country specifically, sees the benefit of continuing after the assessment these programs. We must engage. That's my first point always. We must go in dialogue. All countries are relevant here. So I think we need to make sure that we engage, but also that we do have a resource mobilization strategy, which I believe I said earlier, is not only about the finances, but how do we work with other institutions to mobilize their technical capabilities. And there are many opportunities within this hemisphere as well as beyond. Now, the second question is from Belize, whether, and the accountability of the SG. Let me be clear, I have been in this position in the leadership. We respond to the member states. The Secretary General is in service of this organization, and the member states are, if it was a company, the shareholders. So we must report and be accountable to the member states. It's nothing new for me. So that's how we have operated in the past. The personal views of the Secretary General are not relevant in my view. we must leave that for a moment behind. It informs us, but the Secretary General has to be a combination of an administrator, a good administrator, and also a person who guides the OAS in going forward, facilitating conversations, facilitating problem solving. But ultimately, the policies are set by member states, and we need to make sure that we recognize that. And there are so many structures within the OAS that will provide an opportunity to demonstrate that kind of accountability. We are not a company where we set KPIs, but I can tell you, key performance indicators, I can tell you that for myself, I will set KPIs and for my immediate staff. Because you need to be able to measurably demonstrate what you have done for the organization. That is, for me, a normal practice. Then, although Ambassador Fernandez did not ask a question, I do want to say that CARICOM indeed is an integral part of the Western Hemisphere, of the Americas, and as such must be recognized in all capacities. And the contributions, the assets which CARICOM brings to these organizations are exactly the same ones as in the original charter of the OAS: peace, democracy, functioning parliamentary system, electoral processes, and so on. Then we had Ambassador of Mexico. My first priority, Ambassador, is simply we need to foster dialogue among member states. We need to make sure that this conversation is substantive and that we get guidance from you as member states, not only through resolutions, but also through the activities. Extra-regional issues, it is up to the member states to determine how we want to engage. I do believe that we have to take account of what is happening globally, because we are not isolated. But the way we respond as an organization will be also in that same dialogue with member states. Thank you very much. Gracias.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, sir. Ambassador Ramirez Lescano is recognized. He will also have 5 minutes, 15 seconds.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, sir. I would like to conjoin the questions that were put by the representative of Chile with those from Bahamas, because I think they go in the same direction. That is, the need to resolve the financial and structural crux of the challenge that we are facing here. And let's face it, our human resource value here is absolutely tops on the list. I've had the joy of working with and benefit the challenge of working with bilateral organizations and also heading up a private bank. And I can rely on everything I've learned in both of those instances. First of all, vis-a-vis our work with international finance organizations or institutions that work with all of the organizations that are linked with the OAS, but also the question of dialogue with governments is essential. I believe that the budget of this organization must be discussed among and between all of the member states in order to move forward on a sustainable basis internationally. Our dialogue with countries is essential equally in order to tackle the question of debt to this organization, the debt of those countries vis-a-vis this organization. And by the way, I think the time has come to tell it like it is, to be very, very sincere. You may recall that Paraguay was the only one to vote against the budget, and that was not simply to be difficult, not at all. It is because we believe that we cannot be here and fail to pay our debt. We need to discuss the budget of the organization such as we would wish it to be. The budget is going to make the difference between what it is and what it will be, and what we can empower it to be. And the solution is certainly not in the hands of the Secretary General. Surely we recognize that Secretary General has the obligation, yes, to put forward a cogent plan for budgeting. But it's up to the member states to buy in and to pay up. I have had the opportunity to speak to a number of heads of state and foreign ministers who indeed have tackled these issues and are supporting it. And that is another reason why I am so convinced that there are instruments, there are means by which we can resolve the financial difficulties of this organization, can and must. This is a special circumstance, a particular circumstance that cannot be a regular occurrence. If I may now just briefly turn also to the question of support for any particular candidate based on traditions. Well, look, that's going to be very much up to every country. I mean, we have been a founding member of the Organization of American States and since 1949, and we have never occupied a position here, either Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, Director, or anything else. But this is not the point, ladies and gentlemen. The point is, who is best able to direct the organization? Which is the country that is fully committed to a development of this country with a government fully behind that candidacy, a government that has 4 years ahead of it, that will make a very big difference to the future of this organization, inasmuch as it is pretty much the whole of, or almost the whole of the tenure of the next Secretary General. And what I would like finally to respond to the distinguished delegate of Mexico is a point that I have already touched on in a couple of my interventions. It has to do with with dialogue and negotiation. The image of this organization can never be a two-headed institution. There has to be a free flow of communication in the organization with consensus. But when the president, the chair of the President Council, or the Secretary General says something, that is something, in my judgment, that must be backed by all countries. And if that's not the case, or it seems not to be, we need to work on it so that it is. Thank you very much, sir, says the president, the chair. Bolivia is next. Thank you. The plurinational state of Bolivia is very grateful to the presentations we have heard this morning by the two candidates for Secretary General, and we take good note of them. We would respectfully put the following questions to both candidates. First of all, given the advance of the number of people that inhabit this hemisphere, what do you think of equality of gender in the Americas and at all levels in this institution? And secondly, given the present juncture worldwide, how do you feel about human rights, and what importance will you give human rights in your tenure? If you were elected, what actions would you take immediately in that arena? And third, given that the first article of our Articles of Agreement established that the OAS has no faculties but those or powers that this charter affords it, how do you see this organization's ability at any point to intervene in the domestic dealings of this organization, as happened in Bolivia in 2019? Thank you. Thank you, Bolivia. Uruguay is next. Thank you. My question to the candidates and to the candidates to the position of Secretary General would be questions that deal with the design, the thrust, the traction or suggestions or initiatives, call them what you want. What would be the general philosophy and policies would you have with regard to Venezuela. The situation is tragic. The Venezuelan people are living a difficult and tragic moment. So that's my first question. Secondly, in order for there to be greater volume, coherence, activism, and effectiveness to the interventions of the Dear American Commission of Human Rights, what would you suggest? How can you give the IACHR more clout, in other words? Thank you. Thank you. El Salvador is next. Thank you. And let me begin by thanking Mr. Ramdeen and the other candidate. We find ourselves at a historic juncture, and we know that as of today, your future, both candidates, will be determined. How do you see a good way forward? How do you see this organization becoming more modern, more effectiveness? Leaving aside any personal attributes, that is not the point that interests El Salvador. The 4 pillars of this organization need to be attended without bias. How would you do that on the basis of what is written in the charter? The organization and the head of the organization will have to be a person that facilitates dialogue and that goes for the possible. Too often, the multilateral approach has been lost, and I think the organization is the loser. So let us ask the following questions to the candidates. How will you contribute to recovering the trust and to strengthening the dialogue that you may have with all of the member statements, all of the member countries, without bias and with full respect to the national purview of each? Secondly, transparency and accountability. What measures would you take from the Secretariat to bolster these? And finally, what steps would you take to modernize this organization, to make it more efficient in a tangible manner that will benefit the countries of the Americas? Thank you. Thank you, El Salvador. Brazil is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before starting, I would like to express thanks for the holding this session and thank the candidates for being here. Brazil places much importance on this opportunity for dialogue because this enables us to get a better understanding of what each candidate's outlook for the future of this organization is and what their proposals are. On that, I would like to read 3 questions to the candidates. If elected, how does the candidate plan to concretely contribute to the efforts of the member states to reform or overhaul the governance and the management of this organization? Second question, in the view of each candidate, what is the main contribution, what is the value added that the OAS offers to the region? Third question, which measures, if elected, would each candidate seek to carry out to ensure gender equality in the high echelon of the General Secretariat? Thank you.
Gracias, Brasil.
Thank you, Brazil. Ecuador has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The delegation of Ecuador would like to greet the ministers. And we're grateful for this opportunity this morning to hear what each has to say regarding their proposals for the organization. Some of the aspects that our delegation wanted to raise have already been asked by other delegates. So now we'd like to zero in on some concrete aspects. One has to do how the Secretary General can address those flagrant violations of the principles of this organization and to ensure the implementation and full application of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Second question refers to the pillar of development, and I would ask each candidate, what would your stance be to overcome this trap of mid-income countries and to promote a change regarding the multidimensional approach to development to ensure greater access to international finance and other forms of financing for international cooperation for sustainable development? Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Ecuador.
Thank you, Ecuador. I offer the floor to Albert Ramdeen for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much to the representative from Bolivia in the first place. I strongly believe in equality and gender balance. And the best way to demonstrate that is to look at the records, how my own team was composed of when I was here at the OAS. Gender balance in access in terms of females. Same wherever I have worked. Currently, the team behind me and in the chair of Suriname, mostly female. I recognize capabilities, and I have noticed that when we don't look at the gender, we see that females very much are in a better position in that regard. In terms of indigenous people, my experience here with the working group indigenous people, we have to see how we can reactivate that or activate that much more, much stronger, because it fulfills an important role for the debate, but a lot is happening in the hemisphere with regard to the position of indigenous people. Recently, we hosted the ACTO meeting in Paramaribo on the Amazon, and what Brazil showed us is how much of that territory is occupied in different countries, 8 countries, by indigenous people. So there is need to focus on that stronger. You raised the question about the inter-American interaction. Well, in terms of, and this goes to some of the other questions raised, the Inter-American Democratic Charter is a useful tool. Maybe after so many years in operation, time to reflect on it, but it has clear provisions that give the Secretary General the opportunity to not intervene, but at least to get information from within countries and report back to the Permanent Council for proper decision making. And I think that tool should not be underestimated. We have the question about from El Salvador with regard to the OAS. Well, I strongly believe in terms of modernization that change is needed. And it's not a regular way of doing business. But for that, you need somebody who knows the organization, has worked within the organization to be able to adapt and amend as much as possible, working with the Secretariat. We must see the benefit of the OAS. This is one of the most important things to convey to member states. But that can only happen when we demonstrate also that we are doing a good job. We cannot expect from member states to pay more money if they see that the value of that money is not utilized properly. We must. So I reverse it. If we do a good job and the member states see that, I'm sure that we can convince member states to possibly consider more funds to the OAS. But there is a task to us. And I firmly believe that we can do that because the staff which is here is very capable. We need to demonstrate that. And we'll have to be very specific. In terms of communication within the OAS, very, very structured, regular meetings at all levels is necessary. This is how management is. When you manage an organization, you must have dialogue which goes from the top to the bottom and from the bottom up. And that can only happen if you have embedded structures of dialogue and communication on workload, on other issues with regard to the OAS. Quickly then to, I spoke already about the Inter-American Democratic Charter. In terms of Ecuador's question with regard to the mid-income countries, well, this is a familiar issue in the Caribbean, I must say, Ambassador. But my advice would be to have a discussion also in the OAS about what is proposed by Barbados in terms of the Bridgetown Initiative, in terms of access to financing, in terms of climate change, but also, which has been endorsed by the United Nations also, the Multi-Vulnerability Index, which creates a different way of measuring countries in terms of level of development. And we must include that in our debate here. How to contribute to the reform? I strongly believe we need to work with not only within the OAS, but also within the inter-American institutions, the PAHO, ICA, IDB, and all the other institutions, the juridical committee. I know that we can add value because I have worked with them before, Instituto del Niño. There are so many institutions within the OAS that do a great job, and we must make sure that always representation in level of the whole community and in terms of gender is balanced.
Gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Your Excellency, Rubén Ramirez Lescano has the floor.
Muchas gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, inclusion is an unavoidable and fundamental matter. There cannot be discrimination, and policies are going to be built together, and those countries that where there's a divergence will a special agenda will be fashioned for them. As I said, human rights, as I said from the outset, from Paraguay, values and principles, key fundamental principles of democracy, human rights, freedoms, the rule of law. These are key fundamental aspects that we will uphold and preserve in every way possible, making sure that the bodies that work on those areas are operating effectively. Each action that we carry out has to be in keeping with the full sovereignty of member states. The OAS is responsible for ensuring full compliance with the Inter-American Charter, such that the promotion of these values that we are all committed to, because all of the countries have signed on to them, is unavoidable. Democracy, human rights are key, and we can't just take part of it and leave the rest. Regarding the question asked about what the value added that this organization offers the region is, that's the longest standing question. I will answer in the following way. If we were to stick to tradition, we would, as Albert Einstein said, as he said, if we keep doing things the same way, we are going to always have the same results. This is a time for change and modernization, overhaul of this organization. It's the second time that I'm a Minister of Foreign Relations of my country, and I hear from all of my colleagues and heads of state with whom I interact. There's only one exception. One head of state said, "Ruben, why do you want to be a candidate to the OAS? Why are you going to lose your time at that organization that serves no purpose?" Because we are always hewing to tradition. Does that mean we're always going to be doing things the same way? I think we have to change. But that change has to be coordinated or done in a coordinated way, built on a vision of the integration of our hemisphere. We have to start seeing each other as equals. There cannot be any type of discrimination here. Creed, race, religion. And I come from a culture that respects these values and principles, such that I can assure you that our organization, under the leadership of a Secretary General, has at its disposal two essential tools with which to start to build a different organization. The first is the ability to propose. We know how to address economic situations of our countries. During 10 years, I have built projects and programs in different countries of Central America, the Caribbean, and South America. I have worked with governments to fashion their priorities and to ensure there be financing for these priorities and projects, and I propose that we all work together in engaging in dialogue and negotiation so that we can lead this organization wherever we want to, based on a common denominator. An exercise we engage in is that when we discussed whether what the financial situation of our organization was to take stock of where we were. There were a lot of things that we don't agree on, but we had to start with what we do agree on before setting a path forward. Thank you. Thank you. Now let's start a third round of questions by member states, starting with Canada. Thank you. I would like to thank the ministers for having offered their viewpoint of the OAS vis-a-vis the challenge that this organization faces. This calls for strong leadership. There has to be leadership that effectively responds to the region's needs. Inspiring conference in the OAS.
Remain a forum that defends democracy, protects and promotes human rights for all, upholding principles of inclusion and gender equality, strengthens our collective security, and promotes integral development. In order to meet these ambitious goals, it must be done with an organization that delivers tangible results, institutional integrity, and reflects the voices of all member states. Canada stands ready to support the next Secretary General in continuing to champion this role for the OAS and to work for the benefit of all the peoples of the Americas. We have three questions. First, from the A&M external review, what is the one priority that you would like to focus on, one specific priority? Two, how would you address the historic underrepresentation of almost the half of the member states in the Secretariat itself? The Secretariat employs a number of people, but underrepresents more than half the member states. And finally, your predecessor, the outgoing SG, came here with the theme of more rights for more people. Canada, as coordinator of the LGBTI+ core group, would like to know how you would promote and protect the rights of LGBTI+ individuals and communities, in particular through the human rights system, which is both independent through the Commission and the Court, but also part of the Secretariat's technical assistance work, such as through SARE. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Canada. Argentina has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We thank both candidates for your very worthwhile presentations, of which we have taken note. Many of the questions that we had were on the budgetary matters, but I think there have been many questions asked about that. So then we have two very simple questions remaining, short ones, perhaps not so simple, but short at least, and we would like to know what each candidate's stance on these questions is. First, how will you seek to strengthen the defense of liberty and democracy in the region? And the second, what are your proposals to strengthen the interaction between the General Secretariat and the member states, and how would you foster collaboration and a better understanding between member states on those topics around which there is no consensus? Oftentimes it's about democracy and liberty, among other things, around which there isn't always consensus. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, Argentina.
Chair Senator Neves joins everyone else who has spoken before in congratulating both candidates for the very real and broad visions that were shared earlier today. Thank you very much. Senator Neves wishes to pose a question to the candidate, Minister Lizcano. powerful climate change skeptics notwithstanding, noting the increasing frequency and severity of natural disasters in states such as St. Kitts and Nevis that find themselves on the front lines of the impact of climate change, could you reconcile any views you may hold on climate change with the very real consequences our nations face? There exists the school of thought that development should not be an area of focus and action for the OAS. So in light of all of this and the climate change and existential threats posed to lives, livelihoods, and the achievement of SDGs, do you see a substantive role for the OAS in galvanizing greater regional attention and action on the development pillar? And Minister, I have a second question. Since you mentioned that the national offices, and you also recognize the differentiated needs of our member states. As a former coordinator of the national offices, I feel obliged to ask, how do you propose to expand the presence, relevance of the reach of the OAS through the national offices, which I happen to believe they represent, given that CARICOM countries have not generally supported regionalization as a viable path forward? Thank you very much.
Thank you, St. Kitts and Nevis. Guatemala has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Guatemala thanks you for convening this special meeting, the Permanent Council, giving us this opportunity for dialogue to learn what the viewpoints of the candidates are regarding the future of this organization. I respectfully greet the candidates. We appreciate your presentations and the exchanges we've had with the Q&A. Now, as a founding state, we underscore the role of the OAS as a par excellence political forum for this region, and we ascribe to its principles. Now, there needs to be a balanced management that represents the interests of all member states here at the OAS. On that, we respect to the candidates the following questions. Take into account the importance of dialogue, convergence, and seeking out agreements as key aspects of multilateralism. How would you ensure that the OAS be a space of effective cooperation and consensus among all states to find joint and sustainable solutions vis-à-vis regional challenges? And what initiatives would you further to strengthen democracy and the rule of law in the region, ensuring respect for institutions and the independence of the branches of a government? Thank you, Guatemala. We close this third round of questions by member states with this last question by the DR. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We too are grateful for the holding of this special session. I recognize the presence of the distinguished Foreign Minister of Costa Rica, whom we greet. And Mr. Chairman, we received have heard the presentations by the Foreign Minister of Paraguay, Rubén Ramírez Lescano, and His Excellency Albert Ramdin from Suriname regarding their different outlooks for strengthening the OAS in upcoming years, visions and proposals, which give us an idea of the type of leadership they would carry out should they be elected as the Secretary General of this very important organization. This organization faces many challenges at these turbulent times. That's why it's not just a matter of following through with current activities, but the new Secretary General needs to interpret and carry out effectively the mandates of member states. It's key that that which has been achieved be consolidated, that we seek out greater cohesion between mandates and the organization's ability to carry them out, and that there be more coherence between the different policies. Now, the election of the Secretary General offers us a key opportunity to drive forward coordinated and firm policies. It has to be someone who is steeped in the economic, social aspects of our countries, and at the same time, as said here, that has the necessary wherewithal, ability to overcome the financial crisis this organization faces. That said, Mr. Chairman, the Dominican Republic will host the next Summit of the Americas, the 10th iterance of it, and we would like to know what the candidates' outlook is regarding that forum to foster multilateralism at a time of so many challenges to the region and the role that the OAS can play to promote an open dialogue at that Summit of the Americas. Thank you. Thank you, the Dominican Republic. I offer the floor to His Excellency, Foreign Minister Alberto Ramdin, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much for all the questions. We had a very particular question from Canada. What would be our first priority in terms of the ANM report? Ambassador, there are 180-something recommendations which have been brought back to some 37. There's a lot of work to be done to make this organization modern, focused, more relevant, and institutionally capable for delivering on all these mandates. But there's one which I felt very particular about, and it may not be the one which is going to the core of what needs to be done, but I have already highlighted the financial element, the resource mobilization. But I think when we work in an organization, the first and the most important asset the organization has is the staff. So what we have seen as staff morale is pretty low. I think if you can create more trust, confidence with staff, the delivery will be better. So I would go for the people aspect here, and that is staff morale, to improve that. All the others fall in place once we have the policies in place and in collaboration with member states. And that means as well that we need to focus on having a proper representation of all member states in the OAS based on their skill sets and the contribution they can make. In terms of the LGBTI community and how we respond to that, tomorrow we will have a civil society meeting, and I'm sure this matter will come up. But let me say here today that I think the core issue to which the OAS subscribes is the dignity of man and females. And I think it goes to the core that every single person, citizen, should feel protected and secure in their own society, no matter what kind of circumstances they represent. So I'm very much in favor of looking at that. This is also a discussion which we need to have with member states, how to materialize that. With regard to strengthening democracy in the hemisphere and the dialogue, I have already indicated, I think Argentina raised this question. We can do a lot more about dialogue within the institution, not only in terms of the staff, the secretariat. The political secretariat is not separate from the institutional secretariat. But how do we promote dialogue between member states? One useful tool, not to make decisions, I want to be clear about that, is a kind of a regional coordinators meeting on a regular basis so that we can consult on the issues which are relevant, hoping that, of course, the regional groupings are working. But also, what we used to do very often is work with the chairman of the Permanent Council in terms of the agenda of the Permanent Council. That's another layer of communication and dialogue. There are so many regional organizations within this hemisphere, not only the regional groupings, but there are other groupings. I believe it's good to bring them here and to have discussions annually with the Secretaries General of those groups. The OAS is the premier organization in this hemisphere. It has that responsibility as well to unite the inter-American system. Not only what belongs to the OAS, but even beyond that. Guatemala raised the issue of dialogue. I go beyond the dialogue mechanisms I spoke about, but I think we should consider regular dialogue, as I mentioned, with regard to indigenous communities, but civil society as large. Not only at the OAS, and same goes for permanent observers. More frequent meetings with permanent observers, more frequent meetings with civil society. We all are responsible for the betterment of this hemisphere. It's not only the governments, we all in society. Then we also need to engage with the private sector. They can contribute meaningfully to democracy, protection of human rights, security, and good governance. And I think we can benefit from that engagement. We have done all these things already, so it's a matter of just building on that again. In terms of the Dominican Republic, let me end with the Summit of the Americas, a useful tool of presidential diplomacy, more than presidential diplomacy, as a work program. But I believe that the Summit of the Americas should align with mandates from within the inter-American system. What is decided at the Summit of the Americas must be embedded within the OAS as a mandate in the Inter-American Development Bank, and so on. And that goes also to the financing of the mandates. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I have the floor to His Excellency Rubén Ramírez Lezcano to answer the questions posed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The specific priority that we pursue is first and foremost to reach an agreement about what organization the member states of the OAS want. That is a substantive and important debate that will ultimately determine what the budget is going to be, what the commitment is beyond verbal statements. What commitment are we going to take on to take this organization to the next level? We believe that the representation of states has to be in balance and geared toward the needs, capabilities of individuals and those people who want to work at this organization and those who are available to do so. This is a multinational environment of full member states such that we have an outlook, a vision, or understanding of the whole hemisphere. Another question. That is another matter is that people cannot be discriminated against, and what policies and programs are going to be put into effect according to each country's willingness to do so. We can't impose models that other nations don't accept. I think that is where we engage in dialogue. That's where that will turn on our dialogue. Now, strengthening democracy. Going back to Argentina, education is the first phase. We have to work on educating young people, working in government schools, public schools, teaching societies about electoral systems, to endow our electoral observation missions with the power so that the recommendations be implemented always only to the degree that countries are in agreement, because we have to respect the sovereignty of each one of the member states, and the U.S. cannot foist anything on any country unilaterally or collectively. Another key aspect, as we see it, democracy is a irrenounceable, unshaking principle of this organization, and we have to legitimate anything we do insofar as it's a reflection of democracy. Now, climate change, St. Kitts and Nevis. My proposal is first and foremost for there to be a country program. That's where the OAS country office is going to be structured according to what each government decides it be. That country program would determine what the government's priority is. How can we cooperate on the matter of climate change, because the impact is going to vary from country to country. In some cases, preventive policies will be put in place, and for others, perhaps to address the consequences of that which no country alone can avoid. Each country is going to have to develop on that. Now, in my discussions with international financial organizations, we have agreed that if I am the Secretary General, we are going to be able to carry out the origination of projects for their financing, and then we will pool financing from different multilateral organizations so that at a low interest rate and amortized over a long period of time, we can come up with the necessary financing.
And if I may now turn to the question regarding the Summit of the Americas, well, that's a key issue, and one that, let us face it, is of a political nature. Certainly, the secretariat of this organization is indeed the secretariat of that meeting. We need to know what our strategy needs to be. If we don't have a strategy that is clear, we can't have a policy to lead us to it. And so we need, I believe, to take a hard look at the matter and indeed, as and when necessary, to invite other intergovernmental and inter-American or bodies to come help us build the vision that we may ourselves have. As to the promotion of democracies in this hemisphere, well, let's do it as best we can and every way we can, strengthening the institutions of every country. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's dive into a fourth and possibly our last round, and let's kick it off with the United States.
To both candidates for being with us today and presenting your views. I'll try to get quickly through 4 questions. First, on migration. It's been touched on briefly. What can the Secretary General specifically do to coordinate regional cooperation on border security, deterring illegal migration, and making it more attractive for people to remain in their own countries? Second, on Haiti. The situation there is not only a crisis for Haiti itself, but it affects the peace, security, and stability of the entire region. As Secretary General, how would you bring this organization's authority and capacities to bear on the situation? Thirdly, there are several authoritarian governments from outside the region who do not share our hemisphere's commitment to democracy and that are seeking to increase their influence in the hemisphere and at the OAS. Most notably, China is an observer to this organization and has provided financial contributions to the OAS in the past, though they do not do so currently. As Secretary General, would you support a return of China providing funding to this organization to increase their influence here? And finally, how do you believe that the organization should engage with countries that systematically disregard and abuse the democratic principles enshrined in the Inter-American Democratic Charter, such as Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua? How can the organization uphold its commitment to democracy and human rights while ensuring accountability for these abuses? And what role should the Secretary General play in addressing these challenges while maintaining the integrity of the inter-American system? Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, United States. I am happy to recognize Colombia. Thank you. And good morning and special greetings to the candidates and to the ministers that they also are. I'd like to pick up on a reference that was made that is really very much to do with our present juncture. How can we move to reduce the dependence of this organization on specific contributions? Big question. For lack of time, alas, it is probably overly complex to even begin to tackle it. The question would go to how to structure the General Secretariat. The two are not unlinked. And I would ask you how you, each of you, see the ideal secretariat in this organization. And would you imagine anything that might entail the elimination or the conflation of departments that exist as of now? How do you see the leadership issue here? The question goes to both of you, by the way. Thank you very much. Colombia, says the chair. Antigua and Barbuda recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, I have the honor of placing on record Antigua and Barbuda's support of His Excellency Albert Ramdeen. His candidature has been endorsed by the heads of government of the Caribbean community and by our Council on Foreign and Community Relations. Antigua and Barbuda believes that the election of Minister Ramdeen to the Secretary Generalship would signal a commitment to equity, inclusivity, and the revitalization of the OAS. That is my comment at this time, sir.
Muchas gracias.
I thank you, Antigua and Barbuda. Panama is recognized.
Señor Presidente, permítame iniciar agradeciendo a la presidencia de este Consejo por la inclusión de este punto en el orden del día, así como la delegación de Costa Rica, Ecuador, Chile y a la misión observadora permanente de Francia por la proposición de los panelistas, cuyas valiosas intervenciones agradecemos y de las cuales hemos tomado debida nota. Es un honor para la delegación de Panamá participar en esta sesión extraordinaria del Consejo Permanente.
It is an honor for Panama to participate at this meeting and to address the question of who next should lead the Organization of American States. This is a key moment for the future of our organization. The election of the next Secretary General of this OAS will speak to the commitments that this organization stands for, i.e., democracy, human rights, development, and security in the hemisphere. Panama, as a nation that very much values dialogue, consensus, and multilateral consensus, considers it absolutely fundamental that the OAS remain a leader in this hemisphere and that it reflect the aspirations of each of its member countries. To that extent, we are very pleased to see the candidacies that have come before us, and we trust that the process of election will be marked by transparency, institutional respect, and a search for common well-being in the hemisphere. In that regard, Panama would have a great many questions to ask, but we've really boiled it down to this in terms of priorities. What, in your judgment, is the future of the OAS? And how do you see your role as potential Secretary General in strengthening it? What should be the organizational structure of the organization? That's all question one. Two, how do you see the financial sustainability of the organization? And how could you move away, how could you wean us from over-dependence on a few donors? What about the civil society role? That's the next question. And last, what role do you think the OAS could or should play in the question of migratory crises? And as a final comment, let me say that Panama has respectfully requested that in 2026 we hold the General Assembly of the OAS in our country, inasmuch as that is the year that we will be celebrating the 200th anniversary of the Amphictyonic Treaty that led to the Panama Canal. We will, of course, be making that point in a formal session, but wanted to mention it here. Thank you very much indeed. Last in this session, Grenada. Please go ahead. Grenada?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And we congratulate and also thank the candidates for your presentation so succinctly of your vision for the OAS, should you be there as Secretary General. It is well known and not a secret that Grenada, as a member of the CARICOM group of member states here at the OAS, endorses the candidacy of Minister Ramdin. Nonetheless, at this stage, we would like to pose two questions. First, to Minister Ramdin. You have emphasized the need for a more inclusive and effective inter-American system. The private sector plays a crucial role in economic development, innovation, and even regional integration, yet its engagement within the OAS framework remains somewhat limited. How do you, Minister Ramdin, envision strengthening the role of the private sector in the OAS and the broader inter-American system, and what concrete steps will you take to ensure this greater integration? To Minister Ramirez-Lescano, you have spoken extensively about the impact of climate change and existential threat, you call it as well, which affect many of our nations. We are resolute in our case, in our call for climate justice. And in line with the Bridgetown Initiative, we recognize our situation as a climate crisis, particularly in securing meaningful commitments from major emitters and ensuring that there is access to adequate climate financing for vulnerable states. As Secretary General, what specific strategies will you pursue to advance the cause of climate justice? I got your response to the colleague on climate change, but now we are asking specifically climate justice. What would be your position and possible strategies for mobilizing tangible support to countries most affected? Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Grenada.
Thank you very much, Grenada. Pleased to give the floor now to candidate Albert Ramdeen for 5 minutes.
Señor Presidente, to start with the United States migration issues, I think the OAS does have mechanisms where it can facilitate regional cooperation on security-related matters, certainly when it comes to border security. I think it is important to continue supporting those institutions and mechanisms within the OAS. Possibly there is need for, especially at this point in time, for a stronger, more wider collaboration in that sense, but much more at practical level in terms of operations. In terms of migration, how on the longer term, I think this is a topic which certainly would have my attention, but looking much more at creating a development path within the countries. The experience is very simple. The more economic development, the more economic growth, the more jobs, investments, and steady income for people. Generally, that means that people will not see the benefit of moving out of the country, where they are normally more comfortable than otherwise. So the underlying causes should be looked at, but we must be willing, as countries also, to put our money where our mouth is. Otherwise, the migration issue remains a problem. In terms of Haiti, absolutely right. We need more attention towards Haiti, not only from the political perspective, but functionally. There are 4 areas which need to be addressed when it comes to Haiti, and the OAS can certainly play a role in the last 2. One is the immediate security situation, improving that. I don't think the OAS has that capability, but it can bring together all the relevant countries to facilitate that process. Secondly, humanitarian assistance. We have done that in the past. The third one is a consensus-building dialogue process where we can be very functional through our office there. In the past, it has happened as well, but important to work with CARICOM, who has taken a leadership role on this matter. And the last one is the preparations for general elections, in which also CARICOM, together with the OAS and other institutions, can play a critical role. In terms of influence from other countries, I think that's a general issue which others have mentioned as well. There should be no undue concentration in terms of energy and policy orientation of any member state. This is an organization with equality, whereby every single country is each on its own is important. And I think we should continue foster that for the open debate. In terms of countries from outside this hemisphere, there are rules and regulations with regard to who becomes permanent observers. As a Secretary General, I would follow those rules and regulations. And so basically it will be up to the member states to decide how they want to proceed with that. In terms of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, it's very clear in several articles what the role of the Secretary General can be. I believe Article 26, 27, 21, where the Secretary General has an opportunity to undertake fact-finding missions and report back to the Permanent Council. I think if countries are willing to facilitate that process, then certainly we should do that. But it requires engagement. A lot has gone wrong in the examples mentioned here. We must make sure that we get back to that. In terms of Colombia, dependency on the contribution, I already indicated that. We need a lean, well-efficient, run, highly productive secretariat. I strongly believe that that is possible. Not everything costs money. Simply by reorganizing ourselves, we can do a lot better. So we have to go back to the pillars of the Organization of American States, the 4 pillars. In terms of Panama's questions, some of them which already were addressed, I indicated already, civil society, important. I think we should have a regular meeting with civil society beyond the General Assembly. In terms of the private sector, Ambassador of Grenada, absolutely critical. This is one of the modernizations which we should bring. We started that, but I think it's important. Development is not only a responsibility of governments. Development is a responsibility of each and everyone in society. And that means civil society, the private sector, the trade unions, everybody. And from their own perspective, we all have a role to play. But we need to communicate. The private sector has interest in securing political stability, security in the country to be able to do what they need to do. For that matter, for me, it's important that we engage with the private sector in a structured, regular manner. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, sir. Distinguished candidate Ramdeen, I offer the floor now to candidate Ramirez Lascano. Thank you, sir. Let me touch first on the question of migration, which is absolutely key and which surely should be very much in the purview of this organization. I said earlier, preservation of human right, of the human being, of human life, is absolutely essential. And in that context, we need to look at the countries from which the migrants come, through which they travel, and to which they go. The members of this organization knows who they are and whether they have 1, 2, or 3 of those conditions. Illegality, obviously, is a matter that compels us all, and we must work on the matter from the ground up. That is, what are the original impulses of migration? Why do people get up and go? Why aren't they happy where they are? Well, that leads us to the 4 basic pillars that we know so well in this organization. Now, on the question of Haiti, a priority issue, if ever there was one, not only as a candidate of to the position of Secretary General, but also as a representative of the Republic of Paraguay. We cannot sit idly by and see a country in the grip of such a series of unending disasters. Now, we feed 100 million people in the world. There is a question of security here. Security in Haiti is absolutely essential, but perhaps more than that, were it possible, is the question of institutionality, governance. We need to be able to work through the OAS, and the OAS must work with Haiti to work through that problem. As to Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, we absolutely must work intensively to see what we can do to foster a return to democracy. We've worked very hard on that, and we think that it is entirely of the essence that we see what we can do and do better. But within the General Secretariat, as I see us, we would have to begin by working on consensus and negotiation in order to better understand the position of each of the countries. As to donors, there I think we need to tackle the matter from 3 different standpoints. First of all, the rules of our organization as regards observers. Secondly, what are the objectives that we hope to build together? And third, what might be the conditionality imposed by donors that we are prepared to accept? And there is where, yet again, we have to work as one to ensure that we don't veer, not even by 1 millimeter, from the absolute target that this organization has set for itself, failing which we will fail. Regarding specific contributions, I think year on year, the contribution to the organization has gone down. Inflation is one thing that has eroded. Another, quite frankly, is the amount that countries have sent. It hasn't risen. And frankly, there is an indebtedness today that is enormous on the part of too many. 50% of the budget of the organization is affected by this. So this is a matter we all have to work on. But the matter of efficiency, surely, is core. And that efficiency has to be aligned with the goals we've set. As said the distinguished representative of Colombia, we're going to eliminate the directorates? Well, to what end? I can't say everything goes, oh, sure, let's get rid of that. Well, where's that going to take us? Maybe yes, but we better know ahead of time what the pros and cons are. And I think to that end, we had better be very clear-sighted and work in a coordinated manner. The people of security of this organization said that they have 186 mandates. That's a reality. And what about climate change? Yet another priority. We have to work preventively. We can't give up. I believe we must set up a fiduciary fund, a trust fund, as it is called, in order to bridge the gaps of the countries that are most affected by the matter. Thank you very much, Minister, says the chair. Let us jump and do yet a fifth round by the member countries, and we're going to start with Costa Rica. Here we go. Good afternoon to everyone. Says the representative for Costa Rica, I want to express my appreciation to Mr. Ramdin and Mr. Ramirez Lescano for their respective statements and the answers that they have proffered in the questions we've asked. Quite frankly, there's very little I can add to what has already been said thus far, but I might perhaps underscore a couple of points. Given the importance of ensuring that the overarching evaluation of the organization, integral, the speaker has used in Spanish, puts it, what would you suggest be an effective follow-up to the specific recommendations that have flowed from the evaluation that has been put in, that overall report that has been proffered? What, in your judgment, is key in that report? Also, from the standpoint of the potential leadership of this country, how do you see us working better to face the common problems of this region, development, security, democracy, promotion, and protection of human rights, to mention but these? And last but not least, as other colleagues have said, given that innumerable colleagues in the region are suffering from challenges that are brought about by being transit countries, how do you think the OAS might help in order to perhaps avoid a duplication of efforts and ensuring that any steps taken be more effective? We would be interested in hearing from you what experience you have on the matter or what thoughts you have on the matter. Particularly, what do you think might be the role of a private sector in this regard? How can we improve and foster better regional cooperation within each context of the competency of each organization, drawing on the particular prowess of different organizations? Thank you. Peru. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Peru is very grateful to the ministers of Paraguay and Suriname, which have highlighted in both cases the role of this organization. We feel that this organization has done a very great deal, not least in terms of being known as a peaceful hemisphere. It cannot be in any way disregarded that peace, on the one hand, good as it is, cannot be bought at the price of lack of development. Alas, too many of the countries in this region are not only not moving closer to the development, but moving away from it. Today, it's 12% of the OAS, and back in 1970, it was 17%. In a few years, in these years, Latin America has therefore become poorer in relative terms by 30%. So Pacific is nice, but developed is important. What can we do to have both? Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to offer the floor first to candidate Albert Ramdin for these final rounds of questions.
Thank you very much. With regard to the questions of our distinguished ambassador from Costa Rica, what we want to do next after the reform report has been presented, and a lot of work has been done already by member states in terms of the 187 something going to 37 and so on. I believe also that in the last budget which was approved, some of these measures were already included for execution. So that's a good thing. But I think the first thing that needs to be done, and I hope we can do this, at least start with the process before the next General Assembly, is sit down with member states and set further priorities. Having recommendations is one thing. Embedding them in terms of a plan for execution will require a timeline, the financing for it, the monitoring, and the evaluation. If we have that as a secretariat, we know what our marching orders will be. Of course, we need to do this together. But it is all meant to improve the effectiveness and the efficiency of the organization. As I said before, it does sometimes certain decisions to improve efficiency do not take too much, do not cost that much. So we have to look at all those things which can be done quick. As we don't have money at this point, maybe we should focus on those. But that's my suggestion. In terms of the issue about transit countries, for migration, certainly, and in terms of drug trafficking as well, you have the production countries, transit countries, and the consumers. There is a responsibility certainly for those who cause this and those where there is a demand for it. That's the two principal responsibilities. The transshipment countries for both activities is something regrettably happening, but also there we can take measures. I know of activities, and we should broaden this cooperation in our hemisphere. There are very focused meetings taking place with plans with regard to how to deal with some of the security issues at an operational level. As a country, we know about it because we are invited. But I think those are critically important because that's where the decision is taken. And I think our people at the Secretariat must be involved in that process as well. And that is really at the operational level. That is the only way to attack and address these issues. Nobody wants to be accused of human trafficking or for drug trade. But we need to make sure that these initiatives, which are in fact smaller groups of countries, need to be expanded to the whole hemisphere. In terms of Ambassador of Peru, I think he raises a very important issue, and that is how do we go about between principles like the 4 pillars, democracy, human rights, and so on, and the immediate challenges which you face in a country, like development, poverty, abuse, and all those things, climate crisis, and the impact of that. How do you align these things with each other? It's a very interesting discussion which we need to continue. I think it is not, in my view, in today's world, the sequence is not upfront democracy, human rights, rule of law, good governance, and then development. It could equally be development, democracy, and so on. They work together. So we need to have that open discussion because I see the problem which Peru is experiencing because we have that as well. The people are asking for development, for economic development. In a different area, a more profound example, Suriname together with Panama and Bhutan is carbon negative. country, the only 3 in the world, 2 of them in this Western Hemisphere. But we are also getting the question, if you want to remain carbon negative, you cannot deforest. You must leave the trees standing. That means you'll have to sacrifice economic development. Now, that's a balance you have to draw. It's a similar challenge which we have in a different way, but it's an important discussion to have. Thank you very much for bringing it up.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I offer the floor to Minister Ruben Ramirez-Lescano. Thank you very much. Chairman, now the question posed by Costa Rica regarding this comprehensive assessment. There is a host of recommendations which are clear, and what we have to start doing is, first and foremost, to determine what the different resources necessary for the organization are for us to get started. Now, we have to sit down first and hammer out, what does the OAS want? What are the different priority areas that each one of the pillars of the organization are going to want, so that we can achieve our objectives and not thwart ourselves? So what does this organization want? We need to set some challenging goals for ourselves, but that, notwithstanding their being challenging, be doable so that we can actually reach those goals. Now, building a consensus is an ongoing negotiation process. For us, the matter of the pillars of democracy, human rights, sustainable development, and multi-dimensional security are all aspects around which we have to start garnering a consensus, so that then we can take on the different tasks and come up with a program of activities for us to actually achieve those goals. This has to be done in a pluriannual way, for the teams charged with carrying these goals out can actually have a roadmap. Now, Costa Rica and Peru raise 2 things that are key to development. We oftentimes call the situation many of the countries of the hemisphere face being the mid-income trap. We can't tackle that situation without first addressing a host of circumstances: the fight against poverty, structural poverty, has to be key and central on the agenda of this organization. Our hemisphere is the most unequal in the world. Our hemisphere has a structure of poverty, or has structural poverty, and the saddest thing is that the face of poverty is that of a child. And to address that, we have to start crafting a comprehensive strategy for interventions. That comprehensive strategy could be, for example, how are we going to address the nutrition issue from 0 to 7 years of age, also school dropout rates, and university education. How are we going to address those matters? Education is key, and also education for progress, education for democracy are also essential. And the OAS has the resources for that. It does not have to invest money. You've got the countries. We have to bring together the best experts, and there are organizations and experts working on this. What is the role of the OAS in that? To work hand in hand with governments to ascertain determine what priorities are to be, and to muster the financial vehicles or wherewithal for us to carry out these programs and projects. As I see it, the OAS needs to first start discussing how are we going to address this, fully aware of the fact that each country is unique. Jamaica's needs, Brazil's needs are entirely different. And the different sizes of our countries call for a anything but a one-size approach. And so we have to fashion programs in keeping with priorities set by each one of the governments of the countries of the region. Our challenge lies in moving toward development, but I do think we do have the tools with which we can address these matters. Thank you. Colleagues, Excellencies, we have concluded the questions by member states. 22 states in 5 rounds took part, and there are no further requests for the floor at this very important session of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States, addressing item 4 in today's order of business. Now, I offer the floor to the 2 distinguished candidates for their final remarks. I give the floor first to His Excellency Albert Ramdin for his closing remarks, after which immediately we will give the floor to Rubén Ramírez Lezcano for his closing round, 5 minutes each.
Thank you very much. And let me start saying that I've learned a lot. Although I know the organization in and out, I still learn a lot every single day from what you have said. The priorities, the different important elements, because time is changing, of course. Generally, we all support the original goals and purposes of the OAS. Those remain very valid, but at the same time, circumstances are different today. I want to make a couple of factual statements. First of all, I want to make clear, if there is a wrong impression, that the government of Suriname, when they nominated me, it was done carefully, very well considered, and there is a full endorsement at the highest political level. The same goes from the CARICOM, and I'm happy, I'm very pleased with what has been expressed here by those countries of the Caribbean community that have spoken. The endorsements have been confirmed several times at different levels, so thank you very much for that. This is the time when we have to look at who can make the difference in an organization. And I believe that we have been able, I have been able, hopefully, to indicate to you that knowing the organization, but also the capability to, and my apologies for the word, to sell the organization, to promote the advocation, to be a sincere advocate in service of the organization to the outside world is within my capabilities. I think it's important that we understand the challenges, the needs, also the objectives of the different countries in our hemisphere. Those are very different. We are not a homogeneous grouping of countries. We are a diversity. But in diversity, and I can tell you one thing, if there's a country that knows diversity, it's Suriname, because it's the most small country, small South American and Caribbean country, but the most diverse in terms of ethnicity, and we know how to deal with diversity and to create something which is peaceful, highly tolerant, and attractive. And that is the same capability we bring to the OAS, which is also a diverse organization. Our focus has been and will remain focus on unity and inclusion, because this organization is needed in our Western Hemisphere. It will be really missed when it doesn't exist anymore. Then we will see what the benefit is from an organization like the Organization of American States. So with that, our focus has been clarified, that it's on dialogue, on engagement without reservations, and making sure that we share as many views as we can, even in an environment to agree on what we disagree on. But we must talk. We must talk, because it is in our own interest. All the problems which we heard today in terms of migration, in terms of drug trafficking, people, and so on, is cross-border in nature. We have no other choice than to speak with each other around the same table, because that is multilateralism, and it will benefit of all. The OAS Secretary General, what the OAS Secretary General has to do is to facilitate that process and to make sure that these goals remain high on the agenda. For that, we will need, of course, to make sure that the organization is well fitted and with the right layout and structure with recognition of everybody. There are some issues which I could not address, and I'm happy to engage on that further. We spoke briefly about Venezuela. That's a long debate, I believe, as well. I heard something about reform of the charter. It's also a fundamental discussion to be had if member states so wishes. But there are immediate issues. The climate crisis is one of them. We must engage in that process equally. The Belém do Pará summit, the COP30 will be held in Belém do Pará, in our own hemisphere, for the second time in the history of COPs. Well, there is an agenda to be put forward in consensus, action-oriented. So I'm excited. There are so many things I can talk about in closing, Mr. Chairman, and you did a great job. Congratulations on your leadership, on your chairmanship, very fair. But I'm excited to serve the hemispheric community on the basis of knowledge, of vision, and commitment. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency Alberto Ramdin. I give the floor to Minister Ruben Ramirez Lescano for 5 minutes and 15 seconds. Thank you.
Dear representative, for letting me today to present my proposals and to expose my vision about the future of our organization and the position for the Secretary General. J'ai eu beaucoup d'opportunités d'attendre.
I have had any number of opportunities to ponder these important issues and the task that lies before us and that we must surely tackle together. And indeed, what the salient questions are. And I would suggest that whatever they are, it's going to be critical that we move together and that we reach consensus as to the future of our organization. Let's call it like it is. And I'm also very pleased, by the way, the speaker now turns from French to Portuguese, to tackle the question as to how, on the basis of dialogue and consensus, we can move forward. And by the way, my experience in that regard, I think, is considerable. I've worked for quite a while in a multilateral context, in organizations of this context, and on issues that are economic, social, and indeed also political and policy-oriented. The question is, how can we do this, and how can we best do it to move forward?
A proposal by way of recovering the strength and the importance or relevance of this organization. This organization needs for there to be a tremendous effort put forward, and I would prevail upon you to work with me together so that we together can build the organization that we want, a much more modern one that truly lives up to what society expects of it. We need to serve people. There is a worrisome concern about the quality of democracies in our hemisphere, and a big part of this assessment, that viewpoint, is precisely because it's thought that states are not meeting the needs of their societies. Health, education, public education, social well-being are part and parcel of that. So we have to take stock of where we stand, given that so many people see the OAS being far afield of what their concerns are, and they are very much worried about that. I think the time has come for us to propose a real change that would enable us to come up with answers, responses to those questions posed by societies. Now, our governments have placed much trust in each and every one of us. They have given us an extraordinary amount of responsibility. That's why I invite you, for us all, to engage in this reflection on shared responsibilities, and regardless of wherever we are, that we come together and build this hemisphere, a hemisphere that has a unique aspect, and that it is the most peaceful one in the world as regards conflicts or strife, but it is still the most violent continent in the world as regards crime and international criminal or transnational criminal organizations. This is the continent that, over the last couple of years, has grown the fastest, but it's also the most unequal continent. If we don't change things at this turning point, one of so many geopolitical sources of tension, of so much polarization and divergence, then we will be facing even greater challenges. It falls to us. The time is for us to do something. Thank you.
Agradecemos.
We thank Minister Rubén Ramírez Lescano for his final words. Colleagues, Excellencies, on behalf of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States, I would like to thank both candidates. I thank you for your transparency, your ability to interact, engage with the representatives of the member states. I thank you for your very worthwhile proposals for the Organization of American States. We know the ups and downs of this organization, the good and the bad of this organization, and we are happy to hear the proposals of each, all pointing toward the light and improvement. So I would like to thank each and every one of the members here for having stuck to the 2 minutes for your questions and for having asked very reasonable, constructive organizations for the good of our organization. I thank my colleague, Ambassador from Belize, who this month of December, during his chairmanship, proposed this resolution 1279, which the first part of which we have fulfilled today at this in this very important role of electing a new Secretary General. And I thank the delegations of Suriname and Paraguay, and I especially thank the Assistant General Secretariat and Secretary, Nestor Mendez, and his team for all of his assistance and that of his team, and the technical staff who, behind the scenes, are the ones who actually make a session like this actually come to fruition. Colleagues, looking at the history of the Organization of American States and the 10 General Secretary Generals that this organization has had, 6 have been in office more than 5 years. 5 have been re-elected. Antonio Mora, Alejandro Fila, Clemente Baena Suarez, Cesar Gaviria, Miguel Insulza, Luis Almagro, all have served 2 terms totaling 10 years. This situation should be cause for us to think about the importance of this exercise, how transcendental it is. It's a fundamental one for transparency, democracy, and participation. which is why I celebrate the fact that we have held this session of the Permanent Council, having fulfilled the mandate called for in Resolution 1279 and clarifying that the different interpretations and the questions will be put on the record. I adjourn this session. Thank you.